Number 1.
Scott and his younger sister, Amy, were last seen during the evening hours of September 4, 1978. They had been at Good Time Charlie's, a bar-restaurant in Sterling, until approximately 10 p.m. that night with their mother, Margaret, and a visiting aunt, Margaret's sister Kathy Schoenfelder. The women brought Scott and Amy back to their cabin at that time and then returned to the bar by themselves. The cabin the Fandles lived in had 2 bedrooms and was located in a rural, heavily wooded area off Scout Lake Road, half a mile from Sterling Highway and south of Sterling. It had a single bright streetlight out front. The front door lock did not work. The cabin burned down several years after the Fandle children's disappearances. Scott and Amy visited their next-door neighbors, the Lupton family, after their mother and aunt dropped them off. They were very close to the Lupton children and walked with them to school each day. After playing with the Luptons, they went home again. A neighbor passing by at 11:45 p.m. noticed lights on in the Fandles' cabin. Margaret and Kathy arrived back home between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. on September 5, 1978, to find the lights out. This is unusual. Scott and Amy were afraid of the dark and usually left the lights on at night. A package of macaroni and an open can of tomatoes sat on the kitchen counter, and a pot of water was boiling on the stove. It appeared as if Scott had been interrupted in the process of preparing a macaroni snack, which he liked to eat before bed. Assuming that the children were sleeping at the Luptons' house, Margaret and Kathy retired for the night. Margaret left for work at approximately 8:30 a.m. that morning. Kathy awoke at 12 p.m. and assumed Scott and Amy were at school for the day. Margaret tried to call Amy at school that morning and was told the child hadn't arrived. She became worried, but her boss would not let her leave work. The Lupton children arrived at the Fandles' home after school and inquired as to Scott and Amy's whereabouts. Kathy learned that neither child had attended classes that day, nor had they spent the night at the neighbor's house. She called Margaret, who immediately summoned the police. Scott and Amy have never been seen again. Bullet casings were later found outside the cabin. It is unknown if they have anything to do with the children's disappearances. Margaret moved to Illinois after her children's disappearances. Scott's biological father also lives in Illinois. The children's maternal uncle, Terry Schoenfelder, believes Amy's father, Roger D. Fandle, may be involved in her and her brother's disappearances. Roger left Margaret and the children in January 1978, 9 months prior to Scott and Amy's disappearances, and moved to Arizona. Margaret tried to reach him immediately after Scott and Amy vanished but could not, although his relatives whom she spoke to said he did not know the children's whereabouts. Shortly after their abductions, Roger flew to Alaska to assist in the search for them. Years after the children's disappearances, a woman who had been Roger's girlfriend in 1978 allegedly asked for $5,000 from Roger's uncle in exchange for her telling him the children's fates. Roger has not been charged in connection with Scott and Amy's apparent abductions, however, and neither has anyone else. Investigators considered him a suspect in the cases for many years, but no longer believe he was involved. Terry believes Amy is alive and living in Anchorage, Alaska, Lompoc, California, or Drummond, Montana, but that Scott was killed shortly after being abducted. No evidence has been found to support any theory. Scott and Amy's cases remain unsolved.
Number 2.
Janice was last seen leaving a friend's home in Smithtown, Long Island, New York, at 10:45 p.m. on October 30, 1981. She stopped at her friend's and invited the friend to accompany her. The friend decided not to and Janice left the friend's home on Nesconset Highway alone. She was en route to a local bar at Nesconset Highway and Hauppauge Road, where she planned to meet her brother Jimmy. Although Janice was underage, she had false identification to get into the bar. Janice and Jimmy were going to go to a nightclub in New York City. Janice never arrived to meet him and has not been heard from again. Janice lived with her family in the 200 block of Mount Pleasant Road at the time of her disappearance. She had a naive, trusting nature and often hitchhiked. Her parents and teachers described her as a normal teenager who enjoyed rock concerts, was close to her siblings, and got average grades in her classes at Smithtown High School West, where she was a senior. However, she had both smoked and sold marijuana, and she had been arrested for selling LSD to an undercover police officer on 3 different occasions, twice at school and once at her home. She pleaded guilty to 1 count as part of a plea bargain and faced the possibility of a year in jail, but disappeared 5 days before sentencing. Janice was reportedly frightened at the prospect of going to jail, but her lawyer believed she would get off lightly since she had no prior criminal record. Besides her legal troubles, things were apparently going well for Janice at the time of her disappearance. She had just been hired as a waitress of a local restaurant and was excited about it, and she had a good relationship with her boyfriend. The police assumed she had dropped out of sight to avoid facing the possible jail sentence, and they issued a warrant for her arrest. Her family and her boyfriend, however, never believed she ran away, and they think foul play was involved in her disappearance. Janice left all her belongings behind when she disappeared and had less than $1 in cash on her that night, which is inconsistent with the runaway theory. Her case remains unsolved. There's been no sign of her since 1981.
Number 3.
Bowens was last seen in Nashville, Tennessee on July 22, 1985. He was supposed to pick up his wife at the bus station when she returned from a trip to Ohio. He never arrived there. When his wife got home, Owens was missing and so was his car. After Owens was reported missing, a local television station aired a bulletin on his disappearance. Several people from other parts of Tennessee recognized his picture. He was sighted 80 miles away from Nashville, along Route 13, 3 hours after he was supposed to pick up his wife. He stopped at a service station in Santa Fe, Tennessee, to have a flat tire repaired and to ask for directions to Nolensville, Tennessee. The station employee misunderstood and directed Owens to Lobbleville, Tennessee, which was in the opposite direction. That afternoon, Owens was seen at a convenience store in Lobbleville. He bought ice cream and cigars there. He seemed disoriented at the time and told the store clerk he could not find his wife. Owens has never been heard from again. 6 days after his disappearance, his car was found on a remote hilltop more than 100 miles from his home. The keys were in the ignition and the back door was open. Owens' cane was propped against a car and his jacket and a pile of wood were inside. There was no indication of his whereabouts and no signs of a struggle or foul play. His wife stated it would be uncharacteristic of him to abandon his car and that he never walked long distances without taking his cane. Owens had been an associate minister of the New Hope Baptist Church in Nashville for over 20 years prior to his disappearance. He always attended Sunday services. Owens' wife died in 1989. His case remains unsolved.
Number 4.
An unidentified man broke into the Owens family's apartment in eastern Menlo Park, California late in the night on February 3, 1983. The intruder entered through a window and attacked and severely beat Mitchell's mother, Ora Owens. Her 3 sons were at home with her at the time. 2 of the boys slept through the assault, but Mitchell woke up and walked into the room while the beating was taking place. Ora screamed at him to run away. The attacker then attempted to strangle Ora with a telephone cord, and she passed out and was apparently left for dead. Neighbors found her the next day and she was taken to the hospital, where she regained consciousness. She had to spend weeks in the hospital recovering from her ordeal. Mitchell has never been heard from again. Ora only caught a glimpse of her son's abductor. She believes her attacker may have been a man she'd met the previous night at the Enlisted Men's Club at Moffett Field Naval Air Station in Mountain View, California. He offered to buy her a drink, but she declined and walked away. She thinks the man followed her home and then drove away when she reached her door. The man has never been identified. He is described as 6'0" tall with brown hair, blue eyes, a mustache and tattoos on his arms. He was approximately 25 years old in 1983. Another possible suspect is a man who knocked on Ora's door just a few hours before the break-in. He identified himself as a police officer and was in uniform and asked about a report she'd made about a stolen purse the month before. The Menlo Park Police Department has no record of any of their officers stopping by the Owens home on that date. Ora received telephone calls for years following his disappearance from an unidentified male. The caller repeatedly threatened to abduct her other 2 sons. It is not known if the calls are related to Mitchell's disappearance. Authorities stated that they hoped current forensic technology, which was unavailable in 1983, could help solve Mitchell's abduction and the assault on Ora. She has criticized the police investigation, stating investigators did not look hard enough for Mitchell because the family is African American and poor. Inexplicably, the local police at first listed Mitchell as a runaway juvenile and refused to take action to find him. Ora's attacker has never been identified and Mitchell has never been located.
Number 5.
Karen was on the Thanksgiving holiday vacation from high school on November 25, 1997 in Eureka, California. She departed from her place of employment, the Coastal Family Development Center, during the afternoon hours. Annie Casper, Karen's aunt, was her legal guardian and owned a shoe store inside Bayshore Mall. The shopping center was in the 3300 block of Broadway Street, approximately 1 mile from Karen's place of employment. She briefly visited her aunt's business before departing from the mall at approximately 2:45 p.m. Karen was last seen walking towards West Sonoma Street shortly afterwards. She has never been heard from again. A witness stated that Karen may have entered an unidentified light blue four-door 1976 to 1978 sedan, which was possibly a Ford Granada, a Mercury Monarch, or a Nissan. The vehicle had California license plates and Eureka imprinted on the rear plate's frame. The driver of the car is described as a Caucasian male, approximately 60 to 70 years old, with balding light gray or sandy blonde hair. The unidentified man had green or gray eyes and a large-sized nose that appeared to have been previously broken. He had a small build and wore eyeglasses. The driver was wearing a long-sleeved button-down light blue shirt. Sketches of both the driver and vehicle are posted with this case summary. The driver is wanted for questioning as a possible witness in Karen's case. The witness claimed that the car pulled across Broadway Street and nearly hit him before stopping for a girl matching Karen's description. Robert Durst apparently visited Casper's store several times in March 1998, 4 months after Karen disappeared, and he resembles the sketch of the man wanted for questioning in Karen's case. His photo is posted with this case summary. Robert's first wife, Kathleen Durst, disappeared from New York in 1982. Her case remains unsolved, and Robert is considered the prime suspect, although he has never been charged in connection with her case. Robert was charged with the 2001 Texas homicide of Morris Black. He claimed he murdered Black in self-defense and was acquitted in 2003. In 2015, he was charged with murder in the 2000 shooting death of Susan Berman. Investigators looked into the possibility that Robert was in the Eureka area at the time of Karen's disappearance, but he has never been charged with any involvement. They've ruled him out as a suspect in the 1997 disappearance of Kristen Modafferi from San Francisco, but he's being looked at in the 1971 disappearance of Lynn Scholes from Middlebury, Vermont. Robert and Kathleen owned a health food store in Middlebury at the time of Scholes's disappearance, and she visited it the day she went missing. Karen's parents divorced not long after she was born, and her mother raised her and her brother alone. Karen moved in with her aunt and uncle when she was 13. She had liberal views in 1997 and was passionate about politics, the environment and children. She was a good student, and within a semester of graduating high school by the time of her disappearance, she planned to attend Humboldt State University and possibly study law or political science. Her case remains unsolved.
Number 6.
Eden was in a vehicular accident in San Francisco, California in November 1989 and sustained serious injuries. She was in a coma for 6 weeks, she had significant memory loss, fluid built up around her brain, her left eye was permanently damaged, and her left thigh was crushed. 2 months after the accident, Eden moved in with her mother to recuperate. She improved physically, but mentally she seemed to deteriorate. She had many episodes of mental confusion and was extremely frustrated over the state of her health. Eden returned to San Francisco in May 1990. She maintained regular telephone contact with her mother. In October 1991, Eden called her mother and was evasive during the conversation. Her mother asked her to come back and live with her, and Eden said her mother should worry if she didn't contact her again within a month or two. Eden was last seen in a hospital in San Francisco on October 28, 1991. After her disappearance, a private investigator hired by her family uncovered possible sightings of Eden in the city's Tenderloin district. The sightings weren't confirmed, however. Eden served in the Air Force and became a journeyman construction worker after her military service ended. She hasn't been heard from since October 1991. Her family believes she may not recall her identity.
Number 7.
24-year-old Adam Hecht was the son of famous movie producer Harold Hecht Sr. After graduating from high school, he became a tennis instructor in Beverly Hills, California in the late 80s. On January 10, 1989, he and his brother, Harold Jr., went to breakfast at a local restaurant and soon encountered a homeless man. A few minutes later, Adam left the table, went outside, and talked to him. Harold asked Adam what he had said to the man, but he refused to answer. After they left the restaurant, Harold saw Adam talking to the man yet again. This time it was revealed that his name was Tony. Adam was so pleased with Tony that he invited him to move in with him. A few days later, he brought Tony to visit his mother, Martine. She was somewhat frightened by him and did not understand why Adam brought him in. She was especially confused when he began to wave his hands over his food, as if he were blessing it. Overall, Adam's family disapproved of their friendship, believing that Tony was a bad influence on him. Despite this, Adam and Tony's friendship grew, and they both became frequent visitors to a dangerous homeless area in downtown Los Angeles called Skid Row. Adam even burned his hand badly during one outing with Tony as they performed a special ritual together. On June 10, 1989, Harold arrived at Adam's apartment after he had not heard from him in several days. Tony was there and stated that he didn't know where Adam was or when he'd be back. A few days later, Martine went there and was scared off as Tony tried to kiss her. He also said that he was her son. Adam's family quickly reported him missing and had Tony evicted by July. Authorities investigated the possibility that Tony was responsible for Adam's disappearance, but no evidence was ever found that incriminated him. When questioned, he claimed to have no knowledge of Adam's whereabouts. Adam's car was found abandoned on a Beverly Hills street 1 month after he vanished. There were numerous parking tickets on the windshield, which indicated that it had been abandoned on the street for quite some time, and not just a day or two. Inside, investigators found that the keys were still in the ignition. His wallet and jacket were also there. However, no other traces of him were found. Adam's family adamantly insisted that he disappeared unwillingly, but the authorities countered with the argument that there was no evidence to suggest anything but a voluntary disappearance. There was strong belief among them that Tony knew more about the case than he claimed, and that Adam may have been murdered by him or someone on the streets. 1 year after Adam vanished, Harold ran into Tony on the streets and asked if he knew what happened to Adam, but he cryptically answered by saying that if he stayed on the streets long enough, he would find his answer. He has previously dropped out of sight for a few days at a time, but he's never gone this long without contacting his loved ones. His case remains unsolved.
Number 8.
Deering was last seen at approximately 8 p.m. on June 20, 1998, when a friend dropped him off at the Metro North train station in Beacon, New York. He was ill and was supposed to be en route to Montrose Veterans Affairs (VI) hospital at the time. He is a veteran of the Vietnam War. He served in the Marines. Deering was receiving continuing treatment at the hospital during the summer of 1998. He had been discharged from his inpatient status on June 12, 8 days prior to his disappearance, after a 6-week stay. Deering was carrying a large black plastic bag with most of his personal belongings inside of it at the station. He never arrived at the hospital and has not been heard from again. His sister reported him missing on June 25, 5 days after his disappearance. Deering's vehicle was discovered abandoned on Spring Valley Street in Beacon several days after he vanished. There was no sign of him at the scene. His sister had planned on assisting him with locating an apartment in Kingston, New York during the week of his disappearance. Deering had previously lived in Kingston from 1996 until the summer of 1998. He also lived in Memphis, Tennessee and North Carolina in the past. Deering may have traveled to Tennessee, eastern North Carolina or Florida. He may be disoriented. He is interested in music and motorcycles. Deering often wears T-shirts displaying POW, prisoner of war, MIA, missing in action, or Harley-Davidson logos or emblems. Deering's case remains unsolved. He may have traveled back to where he used to live in Florida, Tennessee, or eastern North Carolina. His family believes he may be living on the streets.